Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Scream, the original Scream, starring Nev Campbell, David Arquette, Courtney Cox, Skeet Ulrich, and Drew Barrymore, directed by Wes Craven. Now, I didn't see it in theaters because I was too young for it. Because let's move on. But I've heard about it and I've seen it right before I saw, I think, Scream 4, if memory serves me right. Because I didn't see the other three until in theaters until I got to part 4. So let's see how, if this is as funny as I remembered. Because there were rumors that it's supposed to be a horror comedy. Or does it take itself seriously? Let's get into the movie and we'll find out. We open the movie with Casey, played by Drew Barrymore, a young Drew Barrymore, might I add, getting called by a mysterious voice at least 3 times to ask what's her favorite scary movie. As she hangs up on him 3 different times, and he calls at least a couple more times to scare the living shit out of her, and gets her boyfriend Steve, as it turns out he's a killer, and the mysterious killer plays a game of 2 questions like who was the killer in Halloween in the original Friday the 13th, as she gets one right and one wrong. If you watch the original Friday the 13th, you'll see what I mean. But guess where she gets wrong? Or I just brought it up. Who's the killer in the 1980 Friday the 13th movie? And that doesn't count the 2009 one because this came out in 1995, 6? I forget. But which happens to be not Jason Voorhees, but his mother Pamela. Spoiler alert for those of you that haven't seen the original Friday the 13th. As Steve gets killed by the mysterious killer, while Casey gets the bonus question, which is which door is the killer at? And she doesn't answer, and the chair is thrown at the patio door. And she hides in our house, and Casey sees a car and gets attacked by a Ghostface Killer looking guy. And she goes to the car and gets chased and stabbed to death, and her parents get home and find out she's dead. And this opening sequence is genius, which will be the concept of the movie, and she gets hung to death, and the scene is very thrilling in my opinion. We move on to Sydney Prescott, played by Nev Campbell, who's going to be the protagonist of this whole series, as she's approached by her boyfriend Billy, played by Skeet Ulrich, coming in her house by climbing in our window, which is typical of high school, as this is too cliched to death by now, but I'll go with it as director Wes Craven makes a genius idea with making fun of horror movies here. But the dream thing in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, as those 2 films worked very well, this and Elm Street original, Sydney goes to school the next day as she sees the reporters at the school and is approached by her friend Tatum, played by Rose McGowan, and she gets asked by the principal's to the principal's office by the sheriff and Deputy Dewey, played by David Arquette, as I'm led to believe this is the role where he became the most famous. From as Sydney goes to in the principal's office, and as she's briefly asked questions about Casey, as the next scene, Sydney and Tatum hang out with Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, and Tatum's boyfriend Stuart, played by Matthew Lillard, as well as her own boyfriend Billy. And these characters act pretty douchey, as the only characters I relate with are Sydney, Tatum, Dewey, and Billy, and the Ghostface Killer, and another character I'll get to in the show, as Casey didn't matter as she died in the opening sequence, so I can't give a shit about her at this point. Sydney goes to Tatum's house to a sleepover in order for her to feel better, as she turns on the TV and sees Gail Weathers, played by Courtney Cox, as a news reporter about not only Sydney's death, but Sydney's mother was raped the year before Casey's murder. And this is rather a coincidence in an ironic kind of way. And I feel bad for Sydney at this point, which is a good characterization from director Wes Craven. Nighttime comes, and Sydney gets a call from Tatum, as well as the Ghostface Killer, as she's at first led to believe it's Randy. But it's not, as he brings up her mother's death, and is almost killed by the Ghostface Killer, but she kicks his ass and runs to her own bedroom and tries to call 911 on her computer, but he runs away, and Billy gets to her window, and Sydney sees a cellular phone, which makes her think he was terrorizing her place, which was hilarious, as she beats up the Ghostface Killer and thinks it was her own boyfriend and gets him arrested by Dewey, which kind of cracked me up, as this movie isn't that scary. It's more funny. Gail misses Sydney as she gets taken away from the house and is asked questions while Tatum comes by the house and doesn't talk to Gail. While at the police station, Billy gets interrogated and taken away in a cell while Tatum cheers her up and gets Sydney out of the police station, treating Dewey like scum of the earth. As they go out the back door and sees Gail as she is with Tatum, said to her earlier, she's a pain in the ass, and this proves her point. But I'm having a good time with these characters, and the movie is that at this point, Sydney punches Gail for the report she said about her mother, and while she's at Tatum's house, she gets a call from the Ghostface Killer, as she's a celebrity getting away from the Ghostface Killer in Woodsboro. That's where the movie's taking place, by the way, folks. And learns Billy didn't make those calls thanks to Dewey. They go to school the next day and find Gail and talk to her about writing a book about it and how much of a lie it is, which makes perfect sense. Sydney talks with Billy about how sorry she is, and he brings up how heartbroken he is, and the dialogue is fine, but sometimes very funny at the same time. In some ways, while in the bathroom, a couple of cheerleaders talk shit about her and her mother's story, as I'm caring up for Sydney, and Neve Campbell does a good job at making the character relatable, as she finds the Ghostface Killer in the ladies' bathroom and tries to stab her, but she escapes with him, which creates a badass character like Sidney Prescott. Gail encounters Dewey and flirts with him, and the police creates a curfew that everyone stays in their house until 9 o'clock p.m., and Stewart starts a party and invites Sydney and Tatum to it, which seems a little dumb after a curfew was announced, while the principal fools around with the Ghostface mask as he gets killed, which was rather stupid, but I do like the shot of the Ghostface Killer in his eye as he sees him as he dies. Randy brings up being in the horror section, and if you were a suspect that told me something that hope I'm wrong on by saying Randy might be the suspect while Billy believes he's the suspect, which I'm hoping I'm wrong about, by the way, because remember, I've only seen this movie once and don't remember it very well. Sydney and Tatum go to the grocery store to get food for Stewart's party, and I did completely realize about halfway through the movie that Dewey and Tatum are siblings in this movie, and it's a smart choice for the movie. They arrive at the party while Dewey is waiting for them, and Gail happens to be there as well, as he takes her inside to see if everything is going fine, and Tatum goes in the garage and grabs some beer, while she gets scared of the cat going through the doggy door, and she is encountered by the Ghostface Killer, believing it's Randy, and she gets killed by the garage door, and her death by the garage door is the best kill in the movie, in my opinion. Randy wants to make love with Sydney while Billy comes by to talk with her about how sorry he is and bring up Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs, where she has these flashbacks of her parents, and that movie is better than any slasher movie, as Sydney wants to make love with Billy, with maybe an exception to Psycho, by the way, while the others watch a horror movie, and Randy explains the rules of horror movies as they make fun of him, as the mockery was hilarious. Dewey invites Gail to walk with her outside, while Sydney makes love with Billy, and Randy gets a call about the principal being dead, and everyone leaves the party as they learn about the death and drive rather recklessly. Dewey and Gail find Sydney's father's car in the middle of the woods, and they find Sydney as Billy gets stabbed and Sydney escapes the Ghostface Killer chasing her around and throwing her off the roof while she was calling for help, and sees Tatum is dead and Gail's assistant is dead, and Sydney gets cut but keeps running, which is a smart move by a horror movie, as she never looks back while Dewey looks for the killer, as he's led to believe it's Mr. Prescott, which is a little obvious it's not him by the end of the day. Sydney tries to call Gail for help, but she crashes the news van, and she sees Dewey has been stabbed in the back, and runs in the car as Ghostface almost had her, but she gets out of, and Randy and Stuart try to blame each other for the deaths of, well, Billy rolls down the stairs and gets the gun from Sidney, and he shoots Randy, and he says the psycho line, "We all go a little mad sometimes." As Stuart comes in, and he and Billy are the Ghostface Killers, as the both confront Sidney as they were the killers of her mother, as well as everyone in Woodsboro, and have her fathers held captive, while Billy and Stuart stab each other until Gail gets the gun, until Billy kicks her out of the house with Dewey, and Sidney and her father escape and call them, as they've already called the cops, and they're sorry motherfucking asses, as that was a badass line from Sidney. And Billy going upstairs, and Sidney stabs Billy and fights Stuart and crushes him with the TV, which was a way to kill the killers of the movie. And Randy is still alive, and so is Billy, as Sidney stabs his ass, and Billy is shot by Gail and killed by Sidney, and the father bursts out, and Gail reports the news of what happened like a horror movie, and the climax was a hell of a lot of fun, as this movie was very entertaining. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 7.7 out of 10. I like the characters, despite some of them are douchey like Stuart and Randy, and I can connect with them and their arcs, as the movie made me laugh a ton. It has its badass moments as well as its hilarious moments, and I enjoyed it either way, and the movie's a lot of fun and very entertaining. Director Wes Craven does a tremendous job at explaining and mocking the rules of horror movies, as this is a comedic horror film that mixes that with comedy with very well done. Let's hear it for you, Mr. Craven. May you rest in peace. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Scream 2. And until then, what's your favorite scary movie?